Okay, the meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. Just trying to see, is Jane here? I don't see her. Okay, well, I'll welcome everybody to our public feedback meeting. My name's Jordan Waters. I'm the chair of the board. And this meeting is intended for the board to hear feedback from the public and our rights holders and partners on the independent advisors report. And so Joan, I believe, is here to answer questions when we get to question period. Actually don't see her yet, but I know she's joining us. And it was her suggestion that we go ahead with this meeting to provide that opportunity now that there's been an independent report for everyone to review. And so we're inviting comment. It's not a formal board meeting, so I'll be facilitating, but I'm really here with ears on along with all of our other trustees. We have Elaine Leonard, Ann Whitaker, Nicole Duncan, Tom Ferris, Rob Painter, Ryan Painter, and Angie Hensa and Diane McNally. So we're here to listen in. We're starting with our stakeholders, and then we're going to move to our speakers list. And
Chair, I just see that the VCPAC president has her hand up.
Yeah, I see that.
I'm just wondering if you might be able to let Karen Kwan in from the waiting room. She's part of VCPAC subcommittee and she's helping me tonight.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, well, before we go any further, the Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Songhees and Esquimalt nations on whose territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. And so it is with a spirit of gratitude as an uninvited settler here that I always take my time to reflect on the relationship to the land and the people who have maintained the land, air, and waters for us. And of course, all the histories that have taken place on this land. And so I invite you to all take a moment to reflect too on your relationship to these territories and the people who have maintained them since time immemorial. We always want to keep that front and center in our work. So Jane Massey is the first presenter this evening. Oh, and I see Joan Axford has joined us. Welcome, Joan. Thank you for being here as our honored guest and independent advisor. I'm just going to do my best between the screens here. So pipe up if I miss anybody. Karen, I see, has joined us. Wonderful. Is Jane Massey here? I don't see her. So maybe we'll move on to Winona Waldron from GBTA, and we can circle back to Jane representing QP 947 when she joins us. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Oh, wait, before I turn it over to Winona, I would be remiss to say that if folks want to send in questions for the question period, to do that with the regular question period email address. I know there was some confusion last time, so I apologize for that. And we're working really hard to get it all sorted. So it's question period at sd61.bc.ca. And that's written in multiple places on the website to make sure that we get that through. And we're inviting questions on the independent advisors report. So that's really our focus tonight. And once we are done with the listening to all of our stakeholders, the speakers list, then we'll do a question period. And Joan is kindly here to provide responses. I think that's all the housekeeping. Have I forgotten anything? Secretary Treasurer Morris? Wonderful. Please go ahead, Winona. Thank you for your patience.
Oh yeah. Is my sound okay? I'm using my phone so I know my internet cuts out at home.
It It's a little bit like you're riding the subway, but I can hear you.
Okay, maybe I'll just hold my phone closer or something. We'll try.
Is anybody,
right.
thumbs up? Can we hear? Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, such a receptive audience. So my name is Winona Waldron, and I'm the president of the Greater Victoria Teachers Association. And thank you for providing me the opportunity to give you some feedback on the budget report on behalf of Victoria teachers. Before I begin, I needed to speak to something that came even further to my attention yesterday when I was in a mentorship meeting with a number of Indigenous teachers that work for the school district. So I need to acknowledge and address how this budget process has revealed some deeply concerning issues of systemic racism. That our system is racist, it should not be a surprise. We know that the education system is built on a foundation of colonialism and that racism pervades Canadian society. It is our obligation to dismantle the system from within, and that means confronting ourselves and our own biases. I am publicly calling on the superintendent, the secretary treasurer, and any other district personnel who were involved in the creation of the racist slides presented on May 10th at the Operations Policy and Planning Committee meeting to formally acknowledge their error and apologize to the community and to your Indigenous teachers who have told me that these statements have deeply harmed them. This is just one small step on the way forward to repair the deep damage this process has caused. Thank you for that. So for the report, I want to say thanks.
Do you want us to pause there to provide?
We could.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really important point, and it is sort of the shaky ground that we stand upon to have these conversations. So I do want to provide an opportunity for our staff to respond and provide that. Superintendent Green, did you want to start? And Secretary Treasurer?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Winona. I think that we've had a couple of opportunities, which is, I think, very respectful, to recognize that there were definite errors along our budget process. And a couple of meetings definitely had some areas that we apologize for. And we mentioned the other night, I will repeat myself, that we have a lot to learn. We are starting in a foundation that is working hard to do some great things moving forward, but we've made mistakes for sure. And so recognizing what you've said, honoring our people and our nations, and wanting to do our very best as we move forward. So we do apologize for those slides or anything that was a misstep or missaid. And we have work to do. And so I recognize what you're saying. I offer my apology, and I offer you my absolute determination that we are going to put the work forward and do our best to improve. And I think Kim wanted to speak to it as well.
So formally, I want to apologize for the slide content of the May presentation. I recognize the harm to community and portrayal of the district that they represent. I am committed to working hard to improve my understanding and learning to move forward the work I need to do, and am deeply apologetic for any harm caused.
Thank you so much. And certainly on behalf of the board, we are deeply apologetic as well, and committed to the work. And we recognize there's a lot to do to, uproot those foundations of systemic racism and make sure that we are having that reflection at all times in our work. And I hear your call to apologize specifically to our Indigenous staff and how harmful that was. And we are committed to doing better every day. So thank you for that opportunity, Winona. And please, you take the floor back.
Thank you for the sincerity of that, and for taking the opportunity right now. I wasn't sure how the response would be, and I really I feel your response. So I'll go on. I want to thank Ms. Axford for her work. We heard from our colleagues in Saanich and Penticton and the BCTF how respected you are. We believe you did your utmost of the job you were hired to do. However, it's not the job we thought you had been hired to do. We were under the impression that the trustees understood they needed to pass a balanced budget by June 30th that relied on an understanding of both revenues and expenditures. What we expected from this report was an analysis of whether there were options other than cutting programs and staffing that provide direct support to students. However, so here we are now, and we have the report, and we believe that based on that, the trustees have two options: direct staff to amend the budget or defeat the budget. If you choose to direct staff to amend the budget, we'd like to draw your attention to 4 possible amendments that were suggested by Ms. Axford's report. First, to use the funds from accumulated operating reserve. The report notes that accumulated operating reserves provide a source of funds for the unexpected decline in revenue or an unavoidable expenditures that were not planned for in the budget. While she notes that accumulated operating reserve surplus accounts should not be used to pay for ongoing expenditures, as the funding source may not be replenished when spent, we think that using some funds from the accumulated operating reserve is appropriate for addressing the unexpected and temporary shortfall arising from the decreased enrollment and the increased costs associated with the pandemic. Second, to fund the equipment amount of $1.4 million directly from local capital. The district anticipates this capital need, so it should fund it from the appropriate source in the first place. Third, to reduce the additional budget requests of $1.355 million. Delay what doesn't have to happen this year, like the laptops and the network upgrades. Do these things when the enrollment revenue has returned, maybe mid-year next year or perhaps in a future year. Fourth, ask senior management to look for ways to provide services from within their existing budgets. Choosing to make those amendments will hopefully result in less cuts to staffing, thus reducing the impact of this budget on your staff and students. But harm will still be done, and you will not gain the support of the community. Your other option is to defeat the budget. One thing that has been made clear in the report from Ms. Axford is that a large part of this budget crisis is temporary. It is hard to understand the justification for making permanent program cuts to balance a temporary revenue decrease, when all other predictors indicate a return to more normalcy once vaccinations are widespread and the students we rely on for funding return. Every other sector has been given financial support for pandemic recovery. Why should the education sector have to accept budgets that force cuts at a time when students need more support? Your kindergarten teachers are telling parents that there will be no reading recovery for their children who need those Tier 1 supports. Those children are facing a demoralizing struggle in grade 1. You are closing options for students to access music at a time where the need for arts and the benefits that comes from playing or singing in a group has never been higher. Teachers tell me about specific students who are suffering from deep trauma, which is preventing them from succeeding at school. These kids need not only additional counseling services that are simply not available, they need the one-on-one support provided by YFCs and EAs. It makes teachers ill to think of returning to teach next year in an education system with less at a time when our students clearly need more. I know you're in a difficult position, trustees, but I think you've also found yourself with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We are at a historic moment in time that with your vision and leadership could be used to change the trajectory for public education. We have been telling the story of cuts and scarcity for too long, but now, right now, we have the chance to truly reframe and begin a story of a flourishing education system, if you will seize the opportunity. Consider, we have a provincial government that believes in investments in the public good. The electorate is willing to accept deficits in aid of pandemic recovery. Government has been listening and has been looking for a solution to the public uproar. You have an immense groundswell of grassroots support that will stand with you to insist the province adequately invest in public education. Vote down this budget and start the conversation at the provincial level about what our students need. This will take courage and it'll take honesty, but I don't believe you need to accept an austerity living within our means budget. You need to tell the province you can't provide the services our students deserve with the level of funding you are given. Be the progressive voice of education and take a strong stance to advocate for those you were elected to serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is Jane Massey here? Can we make sure she's not in the waiting room?
I can't see Jane in the participants list or the waiting room.
Okay, next I'll welcome VCPAC. Crystal Hammer is the chair of VCPAC. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
And helping me tonight is Corinne Kwan, and she is the chair of the VCPAC subcommittee, AMUS, Advocacy for Music in Schools. Karen?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to speak a little bit to, give you kind of a background on where parents are coming from, and then Crystal's going to follow up probably with some points to make, as well as some questions, I think. So good evening, trustees and members of the board. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Karen Kwan. I'm the mother of 4 kids. My oldest graduated last year in June of 2020, and I have 3 children still currently attending school in SD61. On April 13, we all felt a bit shell-shocked. So much of our children's programming was to be reduced or eliminated due to a deficit. My heart dropped to my stomach, and I felt sick. This coming at the end of a world pandemic? The words of my 11-year-old daughter said it all. Mom, it feels like every day something new bad happens. It just feels like it's never going to end. We have asked a lot from students this year. We have asked them to forego time with friends, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. We have said no to birthday parties, no to sleepovers and playdates, no to big Christmas dinners, and no to graduation celebrations. Many kids have seen the effects of jobs lost and family deaths. As adults, a year flies by. For kids, it feels like we've been asking them to follow these rules for a lifetime. We have asked a lot from teachers, EAs, and all other school and classroom staff this year. We have asked them to teach lessons and help students while communicating through a mask. We have asked them to change their teaching plans and school schedules completely, more than once, in fact. We have asked them to change the way every school and classroom carries out their work. We have asked them to teach and monitor students to be safe and follow protocols. While SD61 was putting together a plan for savings in the school district, my 14-year-old daughter, along with many other students in the school district, due to a spike in exposures in our schools, were self-isolating. Many students were by themselves in their rooms with no place to go and no means of comforting human contact when they heard that the very programs that have been keeping them going during the pandemic were going to be taken away. 14 days of not coming out of their room except to go to the bathroom. 14 days of having meals left outside their door. 14 days of having no one to come tuck them into bed at night or kiss them on the forehead and give them a comforting hug. Instead, they were told that the things they turned to for comfort, such as music, reading, coping mechanisms learned from counselors and EAs, were valued less than solving a budget deficit. Many school and classroom staff were facing the same. Instead of being thanked and praised for their contributions to our kids and district, they were being handed layoff papers and told the programs that they have been developing for 20 plus years and relationships that they have cultivated were being eliminated. You have told us there is a structural deficit, given us an amount, yet have not attempted to connect this to the financial documents that have been provided on your website. And when we have taken it upon ourselves to make these connections, we are patted on the head and told we don't understand. You have been quick to refute, but not forthcoming in reason. Now, the district has had to pay for an independent advisor to explain it to us as well as all of you. To us, this speaks to a huge breakdown in internal communication. Full disclosure, as a parent, I feel like I've failed my kids. And not just my kids, but many kids. Should I have seen the writing on the wall? Perhaps. Should I have engaged earlier with this school board? Yes. Should I have advocated for students and programs a lot earlier than this budget this year? Absolutely. How about you? BCSTA says, trustees engage their communities in building and maintaining a school system that reflects local priorities, values, and expectations. Boards are accountable to the people they serve. You may have noticed this little thing happening over the last few weeks. Parents and students have attended board meetings, protests, written you emails and letters. We have given you your local priorities, values, and expectations. We are the people you serve. It has been clear over the last few weeks, well, I believe it dates much further back, however, it's been clear that there has been no value placed by the board and senior leadership staff on the opinions, suggestions, and insights of students, stakeholders, and the public. While we understand that cuts need to be made to get us to a balanced budget, we have not seen collaborative decision-making with this budget, utilizing the expertise of your stakeholders. We have not seen any creative out-of-the-box thinking to keep cuts away from students. One misstep after another has created a huge divide between yourselves and every other party. You have lost the trust of the public, you have lost the trust of stakeholders, and you have lost the trust of your students. Trust is not a right, it is a privilege, and it is earned over time. I will tell you that it is not earned by bringing in an independent advisor, as lovely and intelligent and insightful as she is. Rather than trying to solve this deficit in 1 year, trustees should be more concerned with restoring the trust that has been lost. I would urge you to take Joan Axford's advice and look for ways to solve this deficit in more than 1 year. We stand firm in the belief that we do not support cuts to student programs or direct student supports. There have been suggestions from the public to delay the budget or carry a deficit in our budget. Some of you have indicated that by delaying a budget date or carrying a deficit, you worry that we are just prolonging the trauma. I assure you, the trauma is already felt, and by making these cuts, will continue to be felt for many years to come. Extending this process won't prolong the trauma. In fact, it will prolong hope. Hope that SD61 values their students and the programs that so far have served them well. Kids have been told, in the words of Dr. Bonnie Henry, this isn't forever, this is just for now. Have we lied to them? Now is not the time to take continuity of programs away from kids. If we do so, we are telling the students of SD61, this is forever. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Karen. Thanks for those words and speaking on behalf of parents. So I just wanted to just finish off by thanking Ms. Axford for the work that she did, because, you know, I just noticed on page, you know, it's Appendix A, you know, how helpful breaking down all of the various cuts like this is. I've just found it really helpful, and I did want to thank you for that. And I really wish that we had something like this a little earlier. And I also, the second part was the inclusion of various principles that could guide certainly the next 2 weeks and budgeting processes in the future. And I think BCPAC had some draft principles that I think we would support. And I did also want to support Winona's suggestions and options moving forward. I think we share those suggestions. I won't go into ours. But I think for principles, I think the first principle would be to prioritize student supports and maintain current programs and direct supports for students. The second one, and I think this is really important, and I understand there's been a special board meeting for tomorrow, and that's to conduct an extensive process which reviews all budget areas in detail and confirms that there are no efficiencies left to make. And I don't think we've seen that yet publicly, so we think that needs to be there to rebuild trust in the process. The third one would be delay adding new programs and costs unless for health and safety reasons until next year. The next one would be recognizing that we are in the middle of a pandemic that has caused unprecedented harm to students, families, and staff, and resulted in reduced revenues. And fourth or fifth, implement effective and transparent communication with stakeholder and rights holder groups and with the public so that budget decisions are finalized following consideration of a wide range of perspectives and suggestions. And I do want to address, it was quite difficult for the public with the presentation on Tuesday night. I appreciate that it was live streamed, but there were some conflicting, some existing links to the YouTube page, which obviously didn't work. And there were, it was hard to follow along as you were jumping and discussing various slides and figuring out exactly where you were, especially for people who came in late. And I really, having been at this board table for quite some time, I just would ask that you maybe start with the question of how you're going to communicate to the public and kind of put a protective bubble around that and then build backwards into the presentations so that you're just sure that your such important feedback isn't lost by unfortunate unintended consequences or unintended effects. And I just wish you good speed or good work in the next coming days and weeks as we finish this process together. Thank you.
Is Jane Massey or somebody from QP 947 with us?
Yes, I think Jane is just joining us.
She is? Wonderful.
Yes, I believe so.
Hi, my name is John Horwood, and I'm one of 4 Horwood children who have been so privileged and fortunate to have benefited from the phenomenal music programs in SD61. Unfortunately, Patricia can't be here today, but I have a recorded message to share with you all.
John?
Yeah.
Can you hang on a second? I've got a few other presenters in front of you.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. We're looking forward to hearing from you or from your sister who recorded a message. But Jane Massey has joined us for QP 947. Thank you for being here, Jane.
Oh,
you
dear.
Are next up.
Wow, that was I'm sorry. I thought it was 7:30. Like, so I feel I'm sorry I missed the first half hour. So, but here I am.
It's all recorded. You can watch it. You can watch it.
I will. I absolutely will. I absolutely will. So I didn't have too much to say, so I'll just take a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to acknowledge all the work you did last week, Joan, and thank you for that. And really wanted to say I appreciated with the clarity with which you presented us all that information, because that was a lot of information. So I do appreciate that. And as you know, from all of the work you've done, the membership of our local which represents clerical, EAs, technical, has been obviously negatively affected by this budget. And we haven't seen these kind of cuts, especially in clerical, for many years. Every year we lose a few EAs and hopefully we get them back in September. And so besides the severe financial implications it's had for our members, of course, it impacts the services that the students will get. And, from your reports and from what I've heard, I do understand, and I'm sorry if anybody's already asked you this question the last half hour and I've missed it. But I understand that the Ministry of Finance fully funded our collective agreements, and that the way the ministry hands out the money, Ministry of Education, is what gives a shortfall. And I think you may have said that there were maybe 18 districts. And I guess my one question was, is there a way that we can help support, or is there something that the ministry is looking at so that, we don't have these shortfalls in the future and maybe our membership won't be impacted so much? So that would be my one question that I have tonight, is how can we address that so that 18 districts, especially ours, aren't short, and other ones are maybe getting some of the money that hopefully would have gone to our members.
Chair, would you like me to respond to that?
You just go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So certainly I shared again with the Ministry of Education the information that I shared on Tuesday about the various funding when they put the grants for labor settlements into the formula. And I was actually quite pleased today because I sat in on a session that was being sponsored by the ministry, actually by BC ASPO, and the Ministry of Education spoke, and they were talking about the fact that they do have a funding equity committee that's underway at this point in time, and they are looking at this issue. And I believe that CUPE has a representative possibly on that committee, but you could follow up with the Ministry of Education. So they do recognize that this is something they should be paying attention to.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that. And absolutely, we have definitely have some contacts with QP K to 12. I'm sure they are, and I will follow up with them. And like I said, anything we can do to help support, get that corrected so that the right funding goes the right way, that would be helpful. So again, I appreciate the work and the clarity, and thank you. And again, apologize for late, and thank you for everyone who let me know.
You were right on time. I'm going to turn it over to, well, Patricia Harwood, but I gather that it's John, just because I know you were keen to go.
Sorry for coming in a little early there. As I said, Patricia can't be with us today, but I have a recorded message to share with you all. Just one moment, please. Sorry to interrupt. Is the sound all good there? Oh.
It's pretty quiet. Take your time though. There's no panic. Here we go.
We don't hear the audio at the moment, unfortunately.
We don't hear the audio.
Is the audio not being heard?
No, I don't think the audio is coming through. If you're doing a screen share, there should be an option in the share screen window to tick use computer audio as well. I think without that, we won't be able to hear the video.
I think I got it here now. Let's try it one more time. Sorry about that.
You may need to stop.
Thank you, Mrs. Green and
Okay,
Trustee.
it's good.
Good.
My name is Patricia Horwood. I'm an aspiring music teacher and the daughter and granddaughter of music teachers. I am before you to address the proposed cuts to the music program in the district. I believe that this would be an extremely damaging move that would hang hundreds, if not thousands, of children out to dry. You would create a void that simply cannot be filled. Growing up, I took advantage of every musical opportunity that was given to me, all of which were through school. In elementary school, I had music class, choir, grade 5 strings, and participated in a musical. After that, I was hooked. It was School District 61 elementary music that lit the spark for my love of music. However, it was middle school music that lit this fire. Middle school music is where the most is gained, as this is the time in a young person's development where music nurtures the confidence necessary to excel in all aspects of high school life. I personally grew immensely in middle school music and could not have succeeded or made it through high school without it. I want to impress upon you the damage that will be caused if you go through with your proposed budget cuts. Music is essential to the success of young students. Not every student can be an athlete or a math genius. How are you going to keep the kids in school that don't have a sports team to bond with or a science club to be a part of? For so many students, music is their community, a place where they feel comfortable just being themselves, a place where they go to forget about the stress and pressures of academics, a place where people can come together, no matter how diverse, and unite through a shared passion. Music educators are like music therapists for students. Music therapists are effective in helping people function, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, or otherwise. Music educators are able to provide students with the same support and assistance as music therapists, and this is essential to their learning. Musical opportunities within schools include these same benefits: an improved heart rate, reduced anxiety, stimulation of the brain, and improved learning. How can you get rid of something with so many benefits? Elementary school strings engages youth who do not know what they are skilled at or what they want to do in the future. I still remember how excited my classmates and I were to be able to be in grade 5 strings. We would get to learn a new instrument, read actual sheet music, play with our friends, and show off our end results. This class was our first introduction to a greater level of responsibility, as well as we had to remember our instrument, music, and equipment every week for rehearsal. I was one of the many students that continued their strings journey into their middle and high school years. This start in strings is what prompts many students to explore other middle school options like band and choir. I am a product of the incredibly successful music program in School District 61. Upon graduating from high school, I pursued a university degree in music. I was never a private lessons student. I only ever received opportunities for music in school. Where did I start this journey? My grade 5 strings program. I had no idea back then that I would go on to pursue music in university. I was far too young. However, if I had not had the opportunity of playing in elementary and middle school strings, I never would have had the opportunity to do a performance concentration on the double bass in university. Through this, I realized that the most important thing I can do is teach music. Finally, I expected the COVID experience would have made the importance of a music teacher crystal clear. Under difficult and ever-changing circumstances, your School District 61 music teachers worked tirelessly and effortlessly to maintain the health of the students. They prevented depression, loneliness, dropouts, and all that follows. In short, your teachers saved lives and facilitated students' futures. I would like to recognize them as heroes. Trustees, I also want to thank you, as you have promoted and presided over a music program that is the model that other districts should aspire to, and to know that you have taken pride in it. I will always remember the many times that I have seen trustees, particularly Mr. Ferris, applauding from the front row of the audience as I performed. You are responsible for my success. I will finish my education degree and become a music teacher because you have made me realize that it is a noble calling. My sister is in med school and will soon be a doctor, and she will greatly contribute to the health of our community. I will become a music teacher, which I believe to be of equal importance. Are you telling me that this is not true? My request is that you reconsider cutting these essential music programs in the district. Just for a minute, if you could picture the faces of students that have nowhere to go to feel a sense of community and belonging. Maybe feel the anxiety and sadness of students that struggle with mental health and will lose music as their safe space. And lastly, I want you to think about the lasting impacts that these changes will have on students' lives. As I, for one, can truly say that I would not be where I am today without each and every musical opportunity.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Patricia. And what a family effort. I appreciate that you work together to share that with us. So please extend our thanks to Patricia. Next up, we've got Paul Pantaleo, and I'm just going to tell so the person knows who's on deck. So I'm going to welcome Paul, and after that, it'll be Mr. Stephen Dorsey. And each speaker has 3 minutes. Please take it away, Mr. Pantaleo.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Good. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I was a reading recovery national trainer teacher leader, and teacher from 1999 to 2011. Currently, I am a learning support teacher, a teacher mentor, a local and provincial in-service presenter, and a university sessional instructor. The tremendous success children and myself have experienced is all due to my reading recovery training. Having a reading recovery teacher on staff enhances the ability of other teachers to effectively and efficiently teach reading and writing. When I taught at Tillicum, there were 6 trained reading recovery teachers on staff. And what a positive impact that made with children's literacy progression. A small ripple turned into a wave. Why did this happen? Reading recovery has a very strong research base, and it uses best practices in the teaching of literacy. The goal is to bring all readers to grade level and beyond. I am currently teaching 5 grade 1 reading intervention groups. Many times, I have wondered how many more students I could have gotten to grade level if we had reading recovery at our school. I simply can't get all grade 1 students to grade level using small group intervention. This makes me sad. The passion and enthusiasm I see with children and teachers on a daily basis is why, after almost 42 years in the profession, I am not ready to retire. In conclusion, the lingering effects of reading recovery in my work as a literacy specialist has been immeasurable, as hundreds of teachers, but more importantly, thousands of children and their families have been given the gift of literacy. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you for your time. Next, I'll welcome Mr. Stephen Dorsey, and I'll be welcoming Ms. Sally Murphy afterwards. Please take the floor, Mr. Dorsey.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Dorsey, co-founder of Friends of ICHI, a group of community members and alumni advocating for the rights of current and future students of ICHI. I'm speaking here tonight in solidarity with concerned parents and students to detail the habitual lack of transparency and chronic financial mismanagement that links the current budget crisis to our long-running battle for the equity rights of ICHI students. Why is SD61 so actively involved in the real estate business? They've negotiated land sales and work land.
Mr. Dorsey, you've inadvertently muted yourself.
I never touched that.
My apologies. I was trying to mute the speaker before you because it was switching the camera to them. My apologies, sir.
Can I reclaim my time?
Of course, go ahead.
Why is SD61 so actively involved in the real estate business? They've negotiated land sales and worked hand in hand with the City of Victoria and the CRHC to orchestrate a lease that would see land intended for the educational use of ICHI students taken away forever. Let's follow the money. On Tuesday, Ms. Joan Axford clarified that the accumulated operating surplus fund could be used for capital expenses. Funds from the accumulated operating surplus can be transferred to buy fund capital items and recorded as capital expenditures. It's a debit and credit entry from a finite pool of funds. When asked how the Burnside overages affected this year's budget, I hope it's in the capital side, responded Ms. Axford, who deferred the question to Secretary Treasurer Kim Morris, who noted that more than 5.5 million Burnside deficit would not impact the 2022 or 2021 budgets. However, this response is not entirely accurate or transparent. The reality is that millions of dollars from the accumulated operating surplus fund were transferred to cover more than 2.8 million of the Burnside project deficit. We know this from the information released by SD61 after nearly a year in camera. We can't be sure where additional funds came from to cover the entire Burnside deficit, now estimated to date at 5.5 million or 200% over budget, because some of the financial information needed to make that assessment remains in camera, restricting that information from public view. Through freedom of information, we know that SD61 had already agreed the proposed land lease deal with the city and CHRA before public consultations read Vic High's seismic upgrade and stadium revitalization. They needed the money fast. During these consultations, SD61 failed to disclose that the land lease negotiations were already well underway, and that as a result of giving up the land, the stadium plans as envisioned could not be. Ms. Axford also noted that SD61's board should have developed a strategic plan that was fully resourced and built from the ground up with community input. The current crisis is a failure of epic proportion with potentially devastating consequences for students and staff. The Friends of Vic High are therefore calling on Minister Whiteside to immediately fire the entire SD61 board. 2, appoint independent trustee with a mandate to commission a full audit of SD61 financials for the past 5 years. Make available all in-camera information related to Burnside and Vic High's seismic project and revitalization, and details of land for lease deal engineered with the city and CHRA, and put a hold on all land lease deals currently being contemplated. Most urgently, the minister should exempt SD61 from balancing their 2021 and 22 budget to prevent any program or staffing cuts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll welcome Sally Murphy and let Cindy Rompf know that you are on deck to speak after Ms. Murphy.
Hello, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you also to Ms. Axford for the meeting on Tuesday night. It was very informative, and I was really struck by the comments on page 16. And on page 16 in her report that was put out the day after, she says, if the board had established guiding principles prior to the budget process, the trustees could evaluate the options against those principles to ensure that the budget, and then she made some suggestions about what those principles might look like. And I thought that that was so well articulated, the feelings that I have had that kind of process was not happening. And then she goes on to write, in addition, the district has looked to senior admin to develop the options rather than creating a structure that provides for rights holders, stakeholders, and others to explore the options through a budget advisory process. And again, I was like, oh, that is why the whole thing has felt so off kilter and so disturbing, because I think those things were not in place. And I understand that there is to be a meeting on Friday night. It has been called by several of the trustees to try to have a deeper look at options, because that's really what I feel, and I think that many in the public feel, is that we really want to see some viable options put forward. And my question is, will all the trustees be attending the meeting and addressing these issues? Because I think they are critical. I'm very concerned that there won't be full participation at that meeting, and that on Monday night there will be a vote and there won't have been any time to start discussing really how you're going to make these decisions and make some adjustments and find some alternatives, because there still is time to find some alternatives. I know that that still is a difficult situation, but I'm really, really hoping that the board will still take some more time and will look at what the principles are, and we'll look at using capital funds for capital expenditures. We'll really look hard at using some, or not necessarily all, but some of the contingency fund that is there, to really consider some options and to put programs and students first, because I really feel like they have not been put first. Even though I know in your heart of hearts that's what you believe in and that what you want to serve, but it doesn't feel like that that's what has happened. So my question is will all of the trustees be attending the meeting on Friday night to discuss the motion put forward?
Ms. Murphy, in 6.5 years of being a trustee, I think I've only missed one board meeting. It's because I was having a baby. So I will be there, and I'm certain all of our trustees will be there. I'm not sure where the concern is around trustees not being there. We're in a pandemic. I don't think anybody has anywhere else to be. It's my 11th wedding anniversary, but I'll be there.
It wasn't clear it wasn't clear about the meeting if everybody would be there. And so that's why I wanted to ask, and then to just encourage the trustees to really consider still taking time. I know this is hard, and it's hard for everybody. And I really believe that trustees are trying very, very hard to do the very best thing for the community. And it's really appreciated when missteps have been made that people own that, because that's not easy to do. So thank you, trustees, for all of your hard work, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to Cindy Romph, and I've got Esther Callow who will be speaking following Ms. Romph.
Hi, I'm just going to screen share something, if that's okay. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay. So my name is Cindy Romph, and I'm a teacher at Cedar Hill Middle School, president of the GVMEA, and past president of the BCMEA. What started as the elimination of our music programs, which are loved by not just students, teachers, and school staff, but also the entire community of Victoria, much more was discovered, and not much of it was nice to look at. At the public information meeting on April 21st, it was suggested to directly consult music teachers regarding these important school programs. So far, no one has directly connected with us through conversation. It has also been made evident the disconnect between district staff and their knowledge of programs of students in the very schools of which they are supposed to serve. So I'm going to present you with some facts and clear up some misinformation that you have been given. In the FAQs, the answer given for question 43, it was stated that there is no attendance record for band nor course marks in our student information system. Music teachers have class lists. These lists are given to the administration and clerical staff in September of each year. Middle school music teachers do submit grades. Just like classroom teachers, our letter grades and comments are given to the administration every reporting period and are distributed to our students. I personally have my class lists and student report cards for the past 15 years. I have observed through conversations and social media that some of you think that music is only for the elite few and that removal of music programs would not affect very many students. This is untrue. Here are the student numbers of music students in each school compared to the school population. Since someone loves the use of bar graphs, I made one to help you understand. Our music programs are the embodiment of inclusion. Students of every ethnicity and socioeconomic background are enrolled in our classes. We connect every type of student, from gifted students to vulnerable learners. They work together to learn as one to produce something beautiful. Our music programs are where the gifted students are challenged, the struggling students find confidence and success, and where all students have an opportunity to work together as a community. Even though there's an overlap of students that participate in the different ensembles, band, choir, and strings attract different children. They all equally serve as access points for student success. Our music classes are not for the elite few. Any student, regardless of their experiences, are welcome to participate. If renting an instrument is an issue, we provide one for them at little to no cost. If money is an issue from participating in our field trips, we fundraise to support them. Our elementary strings program is not at every elementary school, but music teachers have been trying for 20 years to get this wonderful opportunity available for all students. If the PAC and staff at a school wanted the program, a strings class was added to the school. Unfortunately, this process was removed from the district in 2014. At each school that has the strings program, there's an average of a 70% participation rate. Altogether, that means over 600 students in the district participate for only 1.89 FTE. For almost 2 decades, our music programs have been flourishing and impactful. They allow a safe space for children to grow, to learn to take risks, and to top it off, work with each other to make music. There have been a number of instances through this current budget process that has led to public distrust over the board and district. However, even with this distrust, music teachers are ready and willing to be consulted directly through conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll welcome Esther Callow, and following that, it'll be, is it Shanti Vione? To correct me if I'm wrong, from Fernwood Energy.
Well, good evening. My name is Esther Callow, and I would like to thank the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations, on whose unceded territory I address you this evening. I'm a co-founder of Friends of Vikai, a group of Vikai alumni and community members advocating for the rights of Vikai students who've been subjected to marginalization at the hands of School District 61 for decades. Tonight, I stand in solidarity with members of our community who recognize the injustice of the proposed cuts to educational programs and staffing in School District 61. Ms. Axford, thank you for preparing the enlightening report. Nonetheless, with the limited scope of your report, as dictated by School District 61, the columns do not reflect the cozy relationship School District 61 has developed with the City of Victoria, a municipality hungry for land. I regret that one of your recommendations to the board is to consider funding 1.4 million directly from local capital, as this suggestion encourages the district to dispose of more land in School District 61, a strategy that has proven disastrous to our community. Here's an example. For 10 years, SD61 rented Burnside School to a community organization funded by the city at the shocking rate of only $10 per year. At the end of this cycle, Burnside was a neglected mess, requiring a multi-million-dollar upgrade, but School District 61 attempted to fund this upgrade internally, using primarily the restricted capital you've mentioned in your report, depleting this reserve. Before long, the district ran out of money, and in early 2018 negotiated a quit claim with the City of Victoria, releasing a sizable portion of Burnside's land for a housing development. SD61 received only $1 million in return. In addition, our community has been told that the rationale for the proposed lease of Vikai land stems from a $2.6 million shortfall due to the preservation of Vikai's heritage. However, as my colleague highlighted earlier, the district's own documents reveal that outstanding overages from Burnside's upgrade are the source of the $2.6 million shortfall. And so we again see the lack of transparency and clarity. In summary, School District 61's financial mismanagement is nothing new and has many faces, not all of them represented in your report with its limited scope. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information with our community that deserves to be fully informed about land use decisions that impact our community. Thank you.
Next up, Shantiel. Shantiel, thank you for being here and allowing me to butcher your name, which is beautiful.
It's okay. Thanks for asking.
I'm so sorry. Feel free to call me Gordon. And next up would be Lisa Marchik. Sorry,
Thanks.
just said it.
I'm here today to urge the members of the board to consider options in the report presented by the special advisor in order to continue funding the critically important work of the family liaison worker at George J next year. I know that you all face incredibly hard decisions as you consider the budget options before you. As you consider your options, I want you to know how important this position is to the health and well-being of so many students at this school. There will be devastating consequences to many students if this position does not continue, and this risk is too great for us to take. My name's Chantil, and I'm the Executive Director at Fernwood NRG. And through our family outreach workers, we support vulnerable families in our neighborhood, and we operate 60 out-of-school care spaces for George J students. Our staff work closely with Layla, the family liaison worker at George J. I know you all heard from her directly earlier this month. Layla makes a real difference in students' lives. She supports the families of students who are in crisis by connecting them with community services, financial support, access to food, and counseling. Having a family liaison worker who provides these crucial supports has a direct impact on the learning outcomes for students at George J. A child who hasn't eaten or doesn't have weather-appropriate clothing or isn't receiving counseling for a trauma can't be expected to fully participate in their school curriculum. Layla is the one who connects Fernwood NRG's programs to families she's working with from the school, and we in turn connect student families that we work with to her. Losing this position means losing these important linkages between the school and the programs that Fernwood NRG offers, like family support, food access, and childcare. Our organization will not be able to fill this gap. Our staff are not part of the school community like Layla is, and our already limited resources will not be able to expand to meet the dramatic increase in the needs that this cut will leave. Families who are already facing extreme barriers will suffer, and their kids will suffer, and teachers will see this in the classroom. The pandemic has caused untold harm to families, and we still don't know how much of the hidden traumas from this year will show up in the classroom. We do know that this already affected significantly the mental health of school-age children and disproportionately affected kids who are already vulnerable, the same kids that Layla's working with. Now is not the time to make the cut to this kind of position. The report from the special advisor makes some suggestions, including pulling from local capital or from the accumulated operating reserves or delaying new costs. I know that doing all of these things come with risks, but those risks I think are worth taking if it means we can continue to support the students next year. As you wrestle with how to best continue funding this position, I know you will find a solution that has the least impact on our most vulnerable students. And I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Lisa Marchuk. I hope I'm pronouncing your name all right. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. And on deck, it'll be Mary Emahori.
Am I able to share a screen?
You absolutely are. Did I pronounce your name okay?
It was pretty close. It's Marchuk, but yeah, you got it. Start the slide. Can you guys see just the slide and not my notes? Or can you see?
I can see your notes.
Yeah.
I'm willing to avert my eyes, but.
That's okay. I can make it better. It's just they're like in point form.
We're just glad you're here.
Right. There. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. So my name is Lisa Marchuk. I am an inclusive learning support and reading recovery teacher at Northridge. I teach both reading recovery and side-by-side reading in primary grades. I've been working with School District 61 for about 17 years, and of those 17 years, I've been reading recovery for 11 of them. Paul Pentley actually was the one who taught me how to be a reading recovery teacher. From the special advisor presentation a couple of days ago, I got two main points, and I just wanted to really be clear about what they were, just in case other people didn't know, because I didn't know. Discontinuing reading recovery in SD61 doesn't appear to be a budget deficit issue. The district is simply looking to replace it with a different model, so the money is just moving. It's not because they're trying to save money, they're just trying to do something different. At Northridge, I am teaching reading recovery for about 40% of my job. It's a tier 3 intervention, so one-on-one. The other 60% of my job is used in side-by-side reading, which is a tier 1, tier 2 intervention model. So small groups push into whole class support. You've had lots of presentations going over what reading recovery is, so I'm not going to go over a lot of that. They're just very different interventions. I do them daily, so I'm moving between them quite a bit. The highlight that I really want to make sure that the trustees are aware of if you're thinking about replacing one with the other is that reading recovery, 10 minutes of it, of that 30-minute block that I see every student, is actually spent on writing continuous text. There's no writing intervention in side-by-side reading. We just don't have time for it. There's word work, but not to the same extent in reading recovery. So what happens in grade 1, and we create really strong foundational skills with that tier 3 support. And then we move our students in Northridge into a side-by-side reading model for grade 2 and 3. And it works so beautifully together because they have the foundational skills to move to work more independently. I have two kind of main questions that I really hope that trustees are going to consider. How will the proposed comprehensive literacy coach approach model, it's quite a mouthful, specifically support tier 3 learners? A lot of these learners are very vulnerable, they're very disadvantaged. They come from families that don't have strong voices, and so often I find myself being that voice. I really want to encourage you to look carefully at this model and make sure that there are tier 3 supports in place for these learners. If we're looking at replacing one with the other, these learners deserve that close examination to make sure that there is opportunity for them to have one-to-one supports. When I looked at it, I didn't see really anything. I saw side-by-side reading, I saw jellyphonics, I saw some other interventions, but they were all tier 1 and tier 2 interventions. And from my experience working with both types of interventions, it's really difficult to create strong literacy foundations with tier 1 and tier 2, especially for those really learners. I'm really nervous about the gaps that are going to be created if we move away from a tier 3 support, specifically writing and spelling. The last piece is just if the FTE from reading recovery is spread out, I'm not really sure what the plan is with the FTE from reading recovery. There's been talk about professional development. There's been talk about a point one literacy position per school if it's spread out. I just have a lot of really specific questions, like how are these teachers going to be supported and trained? Who can apply to these positions? Is it going to be learning support teachers? Is it going to be classroom teachers? How will these students be selected for literacy support? How are these positions going to be any different than the literacy support positions that we've had in the past? They were discontinued because they weren't structured well. There wasn't a lot of accountability. All schools were kind of doing a bunch of different things. I remember doing it for a couple of years and it wasn't. So I think that we owe these vulnerable learners a really close examination of what we're going to be doing with that FTE. I know you guys have seen this slide. I'm going to show it to you again because it's just such an important one. I really beg not to lose sight of our vulnerable learners that really so intense one-to-one support that those tier 3 interventions provide. I encourage you all to look more carefully at that literacy plan and make sure that there is opportunities to reach those learners. That's my job every day, day in and day out.
Thank you so much. Next, we're going to Mary Imahori and following Sally Beauchamp.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. And thank you, Ms. Joan Axford, for all the work and reporting and clarifying the proposed budget. I was very confused before, and I'm a little bit less confused, but I'm still very confused. But nevertheless, I think it clarifies things for me. And I am not knowledgeable enough about the accounting or district finances to make any specific points of advice. And, you know, I tried to actually, there was this mention of the audit committee and stuff. So I tried to go and look on the district website, and I tried to look for the audit committee meetings, and I tried to keep myself informed, but these informations are not available on the website. So if possible, please make these things available. And also, I guess I'm just wondering how does May 17th special budget meeting got postponed or canceled? Like if there's any process that was followed, it just disappeared. And I can't even see the agenda anymore on the website. So I don't know what is happening about that. And also, the one other thing is the May 31st date. Why May 31st? And can we have it longer? Because even this week, I'm so trying really hard to read the long report and, you know, try to understand everything so quickly. And I have children running around the house. Like everyone, I think everyone knows that, how that is. And I keep on coming back and try read it. Okay, understand. But then I can't understand it and I need more time, please. So I would really like more time than just May 31st, if possible. Those are my questions. If you can extend the deadline, and also what happened about the May 17th, how this came to be. Oh, and also I just wonder also if how much involved the board was to develop the terms of reference for the independent advisor. Thank you.
The timeline for May 31st or whenever, or if the process is extended, really rests with the board. So the board can, I think there's a motion tomorrow night to extend the process. And so that really is a board decision. In terms of the May 17th meeting, I canceled that, knowing that we wanted to bring in an independent advisor, which was a motion that the board addressed. In terms of the terms of reference, I don't know if the superintendent wants to address that.
In regards to the terms of reference, we spoke to Joan, who had, we had asked her if she would consider coming in and being a part of our school district. She had got herself up to speed very quickly on some of the concerns and questions that people had brought forward on confusion, wanting things clarified, and the terms of reference was designed to see exactly where we are at with a set of independent eyes who would listen to many of the concerns and questions coming forward, trying to develop a set of terms with her and around what our public and community was articulating that would bring in her to look over all of the pieces we're at, provide information of where we are at and how we got here, and then processes of what we need to do as recommendations, or probably a better word is advice to our board as we move forward, looking at the big picture. And Joan, feel free to speak anytime. A lot of your wisdom was used in looking at, you know, the circuit breakers, some of the things that public wanted to hear, and also providing some very good, deep information for our Board of Trustees. This is a very difficult time and a difficult decision. It's been a long time since Victoria has looked at any kind of balancing or budget considerations or cuts. And so wanting to set exactly the parameters for our trustees to fully understand what their responsibility and job will be, and options that they can choose in this big picture. And I think you've done a great job on doing that. So Joan, is there anything that I've missed in that on setting those terms of reference?
Thank you, Superintendent Green. It was really what could be accomplished in a short period of time. Certainly I couldn't replace all of the analysis that you might want to do or or discussion you might want to have on all the reduction options, but it was to initially determine the position, try to put things into plain language, see what could be done this year, what could be put into consultative processes for going forward. And I'm really hopeful that although this is a very difficult time, that the district will think about starting on those consultative processes almost immediately.
Yeah, thank you for the answers. I guess I was just wondering because I thought that the report would give more different cutting options for the board to like, but I understand now, I see now that the terms of reference was developed, I guess without not much input from the board. So then like, it's just very narrow, and it didn't say that you should come with other cutting options. So I understand now that is why it was. And also, I guess I bring this up because in the May 17th regular board meeting, I did ask if, I thought this would limit more public engagement and involvement, and I was worried about this. And Chair Waters, you reassured me. You said, "Oh, this will be a board decision." But then I guess the timeline that is set now, it seems that there is no time for public feedback. So that's what was my concern. But I think because you said now there is this Friday meeting tomorrow where you can extend where you will extend the budget process. So I am very looking forward to that happening. Thank you.
Joan, did you want to add anything around why you didn't provide suggestions on how we should balance the budget? Because I think it's not just an issue of the terms of reference.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Waters. Really, for me, if you read my report, I'm a great believer in bringing people together to come up with what is possible and what is important. I would not put myself in the position of deciding or putting forward things that School District 61 might do without some process of talking with teachers and support workers and rights holders and stakeholders. And you also need quite an evaluation of every component of your budget to come up with options, which is one of the reasons why you tend to seek those options from senior staff first and then consult on them. So the process to come up with different options that you have on the table today, I believe, is one that needs more involvement, not just one person coming in and saying, what about this?
Thank you.
I see that it was just kind of too late. So yeah, thank you so much for this chance to engage and communicate. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next, I'll welcome Sally Beauchamp, and then Jen Treble will follow her.
Hello, I'm just going to try and share my screen, if that's okay. Let me just see. Let me see here if I can get this done. Oh, it's not going to allow me to do that. Let's just see if I can get this up. There. Okay. Okay, so it should. I'm going to do this again. Here it is. Okay, and I'm going to start from this slide. Can everybody see that? Can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Good. Yes, good. Okay. All right. So my name is Sally Boschung, and you may remember me from the recent education policy meeting. If not, I am one of the teacher leaders for the Reading Recovery and Intervention Préventive en Lecture et Écriture implementation, and I serve your district as part of the Tri-District Reading Recovery Consortium. On Tuesday evening, one of your trustees, and I'm not sure which because it was difficult in the Zoom meeting to actually identify who was talking, asked the question that I have up here on the screen. Is it possible to measure the results of specific interventions? And I would like to speak to that. So as part of your district's participation in the South Island Reading Recovery Consortium, the results of the intervention of reading recovery for every reading recovery child are measured and tracked, and each child's progress is reassessed annually until the end of grade 3. And you can see at the bottom here, this is a great big long Excel sheet that tracks children across the years. Using this tracking data, it is possible to follow students' progress into intermediate and middle school and beyond. And one example is that this data tracking enabled a recent longitudinal study right here in the South Island, which examined FSA results of past reading recovery students. I'm going to switch, go to the next one. Oh my gosh, why is this not working? I have to move this over, maybe. Why am I not being able to do that? There we are. Okay. Besides measuring and tracking the literacy progress of all reading recovery students, there are typically between 25 and 35 or more assessments of potentially at-risk children conducted every year in each school to identify the most at-risk children who will receive reading recovery support. These assessments yield information to the school-based team and to classroom teachers about the needs of all the assessed children in the areas of letter sound knowledge, phonics, phonemic awareness, sight words, reading, fluency, comprehension, and writing. These data can be used by classroom teachers and learning support teachers to make relevant teaching decisions and to form a baseline from which to monitor the progress of all of the children assessed. It is recommended that the results of those initial assessments, and as I said, there's sometimes upwards of 35 of them in different schools, each school, it is recommended that they be used by the school literacy team to select the neediest children for reading recovery support. And this way, reading recovery and the assessments that are conducted through reading recovery serve the literacy needs of the response to interventions tier 3 primary children, while the results of the 25 to 35 other assessments serve to inform instructional decisions at the tier 1 and tier 2 level, and also help the tracking of those interventions at all levels of the RTI pyramid in the district and in each school. So the trustee who asked this question highlights the importance of measuring the effectiveness of literacy interventions that your district chooses to implement, whether reading recovery or others, based on hard numbers tracked over the years. Please know that the data collected over time through your district's participation in the South Island Reading Recovery Consortium is always available should you wish to compare it with any other district-based data collected on other interventions to determine long-term impact or to help your choices and planning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next up, I'll welcome Jen Treble, and Chris Bateman is on deck. Those are all the question period questions coming in, that ding ding.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. A month ago, our greater school community felt blindsided by the proposed budget cuts. And as the community spoke up about the needs of students and their concerns, what started out as budget cuts turned quickly to a conversation of trust, lack of confidence, and systemic racism. I want to thank the trustees for recognizing that the school district could use some help with being more transparent to its community. However, board meetings were not immune, and at times they felt like everything from chaos to a debate on minutia. They were somewhere between watching an episode of Maury Povich and debating the shade of white in fluorescent lights. I was excited when our board finally voted unanimously on something. Involving a third party in the budget process seemed like a step in the right direction for our community, and it came at an opportune time to engage the community to try and restore some trust after the timely uncovering of systemic racism that exists within our district. Personally, I felt cautiously optimistic. Then, like the rest of the community, I found out that it wasn't a committee that had engaged the ministry by way of independent advisor. The terms of reference were also set up without consultation with the board of trustees or stakeholders. The terms were limited with how to deal with the deficit and didn't allow for looking for savings. These all perpetuate the public's lack of confidence in this budget process and in this district. I feel disappointed and that an opportunity was missed. The advisor could have been chosen by a committee that included members of local nations, additional stakeholders, and those connected to programs that are in jeopardy. This would have restored some faith and public trust. Many of us were expecting something along the lines of a ministry audit with recommendations of cost-saving measures in our district. Instead, the original budget was retabled. There was no examination for cost-saving measures. It was as though there was no interest in saving the programs on the chopping block. Instead, a district-appointed advisor was hired for $10,000 to show how money was moved within the ministry guidelines. The only new thing that was uncovered was how our district stacked up to other boards. I'm a music teacher, and $10,000, by the way, is twice of what I'm allotted to run a music program for 1 year. And this does not fund the entire needs of my program. I'm here tonight to remind you that the public trust and confidence of this district and its ability to be open and transparent has not improved through this process. We are still reeling from the hurt articulated so well in Winona Waldron and Carrie Newman's letters. The attempt to cool off feels more like creating space from the attention of the work that so desperately needs to be done. I want to thank Joan Axford for her incredible work delivering what she was asked to do. She spoke about the importance of early engagement of the public in the budget process. I sincerely hope that this advice is taken with real action in the future. Please move forward in an open and in transparent way where community access to decision-making or even the correct link to view a board meeting is accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Chris Bateman, and following Chris will be Patricia. Oh, we already did Patricia, so it's Matthew Payne.
Great. Hi, everybody. We thought we'd speak just as some average parents. We have 2 kids that are
We're great parents.
We're great parents. I mean, average folks.
And clearly a good team by the looks of things.
There's been so many fabulous speakers so far who are so involved more directly in the general, in the whole education system. And so we thought we'd just speak as parents. We wanted our daughter to be here too. She's the eldest at 11, but she's being a typical tween right now, and she won't join us. She did, however, plan with her friends that very first protest at Lansdowne South Campus, where they got their instruments out and played down along Richmond Road. And she's done several radio interviews in those early times. And we were all part of the big family protests, the big protest that happened on Douglas Street a few weeks ago. But she won't come down today. She kind of yelled because she's absolutely sick of this now, is what she yelled. That it's been going on for 2 months. I know it's in a budget for adults, a budget would take longer to solve within 2 months, but for kids, it seems like it's been a drawn out slow death, and it seems inevitable that the programs she loves are going to be gone. When she was on the All Points West interview with Catherine Marlowe, she was asked a bit of a gotcha question, which I thought was unfair for an 11-year-old, but she was asked, if not music, what should be cut? Which to me seems like not the question that ever should be asked. If you listen to the passion of all these other presenters, there's so many things that shouldn't be cut that are somehow the things that have been put on the table. And I think I really liked I loved all the speakers, but the first woman to speak, I think did a very good job outlining the solutions we can look at and the ways we can just put the brakes on for a year or two. Because this is just a very strange year. It's a blip in history. There's funding going out to take care of all sorts of industries. Let's take care of our own students and at least maintain the programs we've had. They're not asking for any other handouts. And if we can maintain that and for this little period of time and then solve the other budget issues that I don't really fully understand, then students can still have all these important programs that are happening. From our point of view, the big one being music, but I know there's lots that are important for other children too.
And we want to thank Ms. Axford for all the work that she did. And when she just mentioned that what we should be doing is voting this budget down and giving us some more time so we can come together, stakeholders, the teachers and the students and the district and the parents, if we can all come together and come up with some creative solutions with some priorities at the forefront while we're making these decisions, then I believe that we are an amazing community that can come up with the right things to help the school. And as a parents, we'll do whatever we have to do to support our students, and they want to protest because they want to keep the music program. We'll keep painting signs. We'll go out to the protests. We're happy to do that. We'd also love to be a part of some creative solution making. And we know that can happen. And we trust the trustees that you will help us have that opportunity to do that. And we thank you for letting us speak today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that your child was put in that position by a gotcha question. I agree that that's not fair. These are hard problems, and it's the adults in the room who need to solve them.
It was good.
Next up, it's Matthew Payne and then Jonathan Faber. I'm sure he will correct me when it's his turn. Matthew, please take the floor.
Thank you, Chair Waters, and happy anniversary. Thank you, School District 61 Board, for this opportunity to respond to the report of the independent review of the budget. I am Matthew Payne, a concerned parent and incoming PAC president at Ecole George J. School. Thank you, Ms. Joan Axford, for the report. I also noted page 16 of the report, as mentioned by Speaker Sally Murphy, that the district has looked to senior administration to develop options rather than creating a structure that provides for rights holders, stakeholders, and others to explore the options through a budget advisory process. As Speaker Ms. Samahuri said, as a parent, it was a challenge to process a 31-page report and respond articulately in 48 hours. And thank you, Speaker Jen Treble, for your comments on trust, transparency, and community access. From the district website, I want to explicitly restate what our vision, mission, and values are. Vision: each student within our world-class learning community has the opportunity to fulfill their potential and pursue their aspirations. Mission: we nurture each student's learning and well-being in a safe, responsive, and inclusive learning community. Values: engagement, equity, innovation, positive change, integrity, openness, transparency, partnerships, respect, social responsibility, and justice. In contrast, these budget cuts would devastate the most marginalized in our community at George J. School. George J. School has a 73% vulnerable or marginalized population. That means that 345 students of our total 461 student body are identified as at risk in terms of their socioeconomic status, with the potential for negative impacts on both academic achievement and social functioning. In the 2018-19 academic year, our school celebrated 100 unique cultural groups from countries around the globe. We know that race and class, and particularly the intersectionality of these, has resulted in a particularly devastating risk for COVID-19. We know that from the homeless hub, the pathways into and out of homelessness are neither linear nor uniform. Individuals and families who experience homelessness may not share much in common with each other, aside from the fact that they are extremely vulnerable and lack adequate housing and income and the necessary supports to ensure they stay housed. We recently witnessed the youngest person to succumb to overdose death. Alea Thomas, age 12. A moment for that to settle in. I want to underscore for the district that cuts to George J. School will ultimately result in increased marginalization in our community that will have devastating consequences. I'm asking you to choose the options that allow maintained or increased community link funding and EA funding at George J. School. Use accumulated operating reserves, pull from capital as per Speaker Winona Waldron or the Batemans or Chantil Viaude's earlier comments. Consider bolder moves, as some have suggested, budget over multiple years. I don't really know how bolder that is, but reject the budget. Make an emergency request to the provincial and or federal government. Please don't cut Community Link or EA funding at a cold George J. School. Your community is relying on you to be good ancestors. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan is our last speaker, and then we'll move on to question period. You'll have to help me with the pronunciation of your last name.
It's pronounced Farber. So like Farber rhymes with harbor. That works for me. I don't know if I can do this. I'm feeling really emotional after what Matthew said, because it just struck me that lives are on the line with this budget. It really impacts vulnerable students. And I haven't seen anything in the report, with all due respect to the author, that addresses the needs of our vulnerable students, our Indigenous students. Not a single, there are 33 categories under just that Appendix A of the report that outline the potential impacts of those proposed options from the school district, and not a single one is aligned with the strategic plan. And specifically, not a single one is aligned with goal 2 of the strategic plan. One very specific question I have about Appendix B of the advisor's report, which I think has a very narrow scope when it comes to what counts as a written budget submission. According to the report, 7 people addressed the issue of reconciliation in their submissions and addressed the issue of equity for Indigenous students. And I know I have several submissions on that topic alone, and the submissions counted in the report just don't add up to the input I am personally aware of on that topic. And in fact, if we look at the May 17th board meeting agenda alone, we can see that there are far more than 7 submissions on this topic, one of which nearly has 1,000 signatures and counting, and that's in the case of Carrie Newman's letter. And those are just the public letters. So I don't know what's being submitted personally, and I suspect that Joan Axford's report is leaving a lot of feedback out, probably unintentionally, but it just contributes to the impression I have that there's been a fundamental lack of consultation with the public. And even the format of tonight's meeting, I'm here because I wanted to ask questions that other people weren't asking, but I was expecting a discussion. I was expecting to have the trustees talk to us, to hear from them, because I'm sure they have questions for the public as well. But throughout this budget process, there's been very limited opportunity to actually have those conversations directly with the trustees. So, I mean, thanks for the opportunity to say something. But like many parents, I just don't have the information I need to provide meaningful feedback on the advisor's report. And I mean, I could go on for the next 2 minutes about again, the lack of consultation throughout the process. I'm still waiting. I've been waiting for weeks for answers to really basic factual questions. I haven't received a single response to any of the emails I've sent to budget@sd61.bc.ca. You cannot, this is not public engagement. This is one-way communication. You're just hearing us over and over and over again. This meeting tonight is just a list of speakers talking to you. And I don't feel that you're talking to us. I don't feel that we have an opportunity to actually talk to our trustees. I feel like the school district is preventing parents from talking to their trustees. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Farber. I do just want to let you know that all the trustees are willing and able to meet with you. I've been meeting with lots of parents and having lots of great discussions. I know I'm not the only trustee doing that. So if you do want to have those conversations, please do reach out to us. We're always happy to meet or Zoom or have a phone call. And that goes for anybody in our community.
As parents, we have very limited time. I would prefer that you, instead of meeting with us, that you answer our questions in writing. I want to see the answers to my questions in writing. That's all I ask.
Thank you, Mr. Farber. All the questions that we are receiving are being answered in the FAQ under the financial tab on the website. I think we're due for another update, but our staff are answering all of the questions. Next, I'm moving on to questions. Pardon me?
None of my questions are in that public FAQ, but I look forward to them being added there and seeing the answers to those questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I've got a fairly long list of questions. So Ms. Axford, I hope you're ready as we navigate this.
Thank you, Chair Waters. Could I clarify the comment that was made about the reading of the input that's been received to date?
Yes.
The appendix has a summary that the communications branch put together, but in addition to that, there was an online survey that I was given access to, and I did read all the letters, including the one that had the multiple signatures on it as well. So the input was reviewed as part of this report. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. So the questions we're doing tonight, we're keeping this focused on the independent advisors report. So I'm going to do my best with that. Any questions that are sort of off, I'm going to mark them for individual response, copying all the trustees, of course. So this first question isn't so much about the independent advisors report as it is about our challenges with technology on Tuesday night. And the question is asking, why was the link and email address for participation at Tuesday's meeting changed at the last minute? I don't believe it was changed at the last minute. It was just a different link than what we had normally done. I don't know if our communication staff wanted to clarify.
I was absent on Tuesday, Jordan, so I'm not sure what exactly took place.
I'm happy to speak to some of the technical. When we have in-person board meetings, it's a different live streaming system to what we adopted via Zoom. So it reverted to the live streaming service via our boardroom, which is streamed via our district website calendar. So apologies for the confusion.
And then the following, sorry, was somebody? No. Was this done on purpose to eliminate opportunity for parents that oppose cuts to the music program to participate in the meeting? No, absolutely not. Will you delay voting on the budget in order to rectify this problem and allow parents to participate in this process? That'll be for the board to vote and decide. So it'll be the next night. Okay, at the last meeting, there was some discussion about the cost of having students return to in-person instruction. It was stated that the expenses incurred would likely balance out the added revenue. I would like to ask for a more detailed analysis of the fixed and variable costs involved. I would assume that there would not be a great need for additional classrooms to be provided for returnees or other significant increases in other costs such as heating for those students filling unused seats in each building. Can the district offer more information on what the likely costs per returning student would be compared to the increase in revenue, especially as class sizes will likely only be returning to previous levels? So few additional teachers would need to be hired. I realize the answers may need some research, but if possible, I would request that that question still be read out as it may contribute to the conversation.
Did you want me to just answer in general how it might work? Certainly, each additional student will, in a regular school, in a regular program, will generate $7,885. So if you, the mention at the meeting on Tuesday was an increase in enrollment of around 300 students. So that might generate, $2.3 million. Then you've got, primarily teaching staff, maybe some education assistant staff that might have to come along with that. And if you have room in existing classes, you're going to have less of a cost. It should be at this point, the question is correct. It should be primarily variable costs. The fixed costs have been covered, the heat, the light, the cleaning, and that sort of thing. So, you might net out after you hire some, the regular teaching supports and some supplies and that sort of thing, let's say with about $1 million on that additional enrollment. And so that would be available to apply to other programs and services. It's one of the reasons why with a formula that's so focused on students, as you go up, you're gaining a lot. As you come down, it's quite difficult because you're losing that variable and fixed cost as well.
Thank you.
So one of the ways to think about this increased enrollment, we talked on Tuesday night about the risk of anticipating it before you have it. But again, it's a balancing piece whereby you could do your annual budget without adding the enrollment and use reserves instead of some of these reduction models to balance. And then if you do get the enrollment in the fall, this difference between the cost of having the students in the system and the revenue could become part of the replacement to the reserves. So you have to think about the fact that you have an annual budget and then an amended budget, and you can make adjustments in the fall.
Does that complete your response? I don't want to.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Just checking.
I could go on,
I have the next question around why have music teachers not been consulted directly on how their programs run and what they need to run them effectively? So I'm not sure that that's a question for Ms. Axford. I don't know if the superintendent or secretary treasurer would like to take that.
Kim, do you want to comment on the actual fulsome of all the opportunities on all the considerations that were put forward?
Sure. So when we started out, we took a look at all the music programs in the district to clearly identify how we spent money on strings, band, choir, etc., that were outside of the sort of funding block. And so we tried to clearly identify those, and then started to speak with, through Associate Superintendent Caldwell, to principals through to music teachers about what was important about the music programming. And it was felt from secondary, I believe, that core 6, 7, 8 band was of utmost importance in order to keep robust band throughout the middle and secondary school years. And so we began adding that back mid-process, I think sometime in April. At that time added about 50% of band back into the budget, along with district ukulele, as well as an Indigenous drumming component for the district. And we continue to receive feedback and look at options in terms of what other music or band that we can consider. And so I think when the board comes to debate, it will have some options to consider. And certainly trustees have been asking for some options around music. But it's my understanding that through the associate to the principals to the teachers has been the conduit for our information from the system. I don't know if that's your understanding, Superintendent Green?
Yes. Okay, the next question. What was the thought process behind the timing of the release of the initial budget? Releasing it on a Friday with staffing packages going out on Monday seems like an odd choice for such a significant budget. Were any stakeholders consulted before the release of this budget? Superintendent?
I'll pass it over to the Secretary Treasurer.
Sure. So I think Friday is our usual budget day. We had started to talk about a structural deficit back in March. In fact, we had started to talk about it last year before COVID hit. Friday is our usual day for the agenda, and we use our Operations Policy and Planning Committee as sort of our budget committee right now, for lack of anything else. And so we certainly have taken to heart some of the considerations in the report around forming some other sort of structure to garner more feedback. And something we discussed as a senior leadership team as well prior to even the report. So it was our usual day. We are following the board's budget process, and it was a regular agenda publishing day. So stakeholders are consulted on draft budgets through the Operations Policy and Planning Committee, and also can make comment, I believe, before debate at board meetings as well.
Okay. Sorry, I have to go through each email. Oh, this is one we've gotten multiple times, so I'm just going to ask it the one time, which is, what are the unusual legal expenses referred to in the report? Ms. Axford?
The usual legal expenses in the okay, I'm just gonna make sure I know exactly which piece they're talking about. So they don't mention which page. I remember writing something about that. Sorry.
It's in the presentation.
In the presentation, well, it must be in the report as well, but if you know exactly which slide, I guess that helps. I just want to make sure I get the right year. Okay. No, it's not there.
To slide 27 of the presentation.
And which year is it?
It's on a slide called risks, and it says historical factors that have.
Oh, okay. So it's basically talking about the risk that often does happen with the expense of legal, whether it's because you have a labor issue or you have a contract issue, or you're dealing with something that requires legal advice. And that is why it's listed as a risk. In any budget, you set your legal costs reasonably, but hope that you don't have unusual expenditures. I don't think we indicated anywhere here that there was unusual legal expenses, though, in the years that we've been talking about.
So to clarify, the point is that is one of the potential things that can happen.
Right. In terms of the services and supplies area of the budget, it tends to be the cost of fuel, the cost of utilities, and legal services or sometimes contracted services that you need advice on are the things that tend to be risks in those areas. So that's why legal costs was listed.
Okay, referenced on pages 12 and 14 is the prior year under expenditure in the amount of $5,221,334. It appears this amount is being treated as a 2020-21 annual budget expenditure. Is this correct? From an accounting perspective, this amount belongs to a prior closed fiscal period and therefore should not be budgeted for as an expense in the current budget fiscal period. This is a non-cash expense in the 2021 annual budget. Removing this will greatly change the financial picture.
So when I did this work, I started with the forecasted statement for this school year and where you were going to finish at the end of this school year. In there's a number of areas where you're going to save money because of the conditions. And so that needed to be added. If you're going to reduce the expense, but it's not an ongoing reduction, you have to add it back in terms of where you start the process of figuring out what your expenditures are going to be for the following school year. And it was twofold to put that in. One, to explain why there was a surplus, which is good that there was, because it did put money into your reserve or leave money in your reserve to be able to help address the issues for 21-22. But it also means that you've got to say you're not going to make those savings going forward because of the one-time nature of them. So it's your starting point of where you expect your ongoing expenditures to be. And then you add in your changes for enrollment, your changes for costs to come up with what we've called the status quo sustainable budget.
Next, could you please tell us about the equity of opportunity savings? It's for quite a high dollar amount, but it seems unclear the extent extent to which it directly benefits students?
So that was a allocation that was added to the funding allocation for districts this year, which is not there for next year. So it's really matching revenue and expenses. There's not going to be a grant to do those programs, and I would leave it, to district staff to outline the kinds of programs they did with those funds, but they won't be there going forward.
Superintendent, was there anything to add on that, or?
Secretary Treasurer, do you have anything to add?
Sure, I can speak to 2021. Equity of opportunity was a new line item in the operating grant. And so recognizing some of our strategic plan initiatives and our data around student results, we treated that as new money, which it was in the budget, and put it toward several initiatives through the learning team. When we came to the 21-22 deficit discussion, right off the bat, we recognized that we could no longer treat that as new money and would have to roll back those initiatives or any plans for those initiatives on an ongoing basis in order to add that $1 million back into the budget to help cover the shortfall. And so while 2021 we used as new money to try to advance learning for students and capacity building, we are not able to do that in 21-22 because of the shortfall.
Yeah, you would need to, instead of funding those services from revenue that the ministry has provided, you'd have to offset something else that you were doing because the revenue is no longer there.
Okay. Ms. Oxford, can you please describe methods the community can do to create pressure for the district to be transparent with the entire financial transaction with Burnside, including a measurable timeline, which will clarify how the district may have been manipulating community engagement at FCI? What advice would you give to staff and trustees to be forthcoming with the in-camera items, given their direct impact on community and students?
So I have to admit that is not something that I know anything about. So I feel that I shouldn't comment on that specific issue. But it always is a difficult one when you are selling a piece of property or purchasing a piece of property. It's one of the items that you can have in the in-camera agenda until you've finished the negotiations and the legal parts of those things. And then there can be reporting on it. And then it will be in the capital fund of the statements. And as I stated at the beginning, I did not go into the capital side of this process, stayed on the operating because it was mainly the operating budget that had the concerns.
I'm curious what you have done to appeal to government for additional sources of funding, i.e. pandemic recovery support.
Personally, of course, I haven't, other than I did clarify with them that there was some more holdback money to be coming to the district, and we did incorporate that into the forecast for the position at the end of this year. So we did do that. I do know that if you look at the provincial budget, they've got allocated money over the 3 years for the next round of labor settlements. And there are some funds there for enrollment growth that haven't been issued. Those are the pieces. I think once they start to look at some of the issues that they've talked about, and we've heard Dr. Henry talk about in terms of supporting people with mental health issues and other issues as they come back to more normalcy and back to classroom, full classroom education. There may be some funds. I think in my report, I talk about some contingency funds that government has. So there may be more funding to come to districts, but it's not something that you can anticipate because you create more risk again within your budget documents if you're anticipating revenue that has not been announced yet.
Sorry, I have a few questions that come in twice. Cindy, I'm not going to be opening up the floor. If you have something, you're welcome to send it into question period. I've got a lot of questions I'm going to try and prioritize getting through, but happy to have a conversation offline or receive the feedback. I think I've got at least a dozen more, and then we can see where we're at time-wise. Was the Board of Trustees consulted on the terms of reference for the engagement of Joan Axford? No, our employee.
Personally, no, I don't know that you were. Certainly, the terms of reference did come to you at your board meeting.
I understand that increased enrollment comes with additional costs. Why then, on average, looking back 5 years, is there a much larger variance between the actuals and budget and revenues than in expenses?
Well, certainly one of the things I think I talk about in the report is the fact that you have an annual budget based on the projected enrollments, and then you have an amended budget based on your actuals, and in most cases you hope for those to be going up slightly, and then you have a February count and a May count, and those things will all increase revenues. In addition, we talked about the fact that the province has money in the budget for enrollment growth. So if the overall provincial enrollment growth does not grow to the amount they have in the budget, then they will often send it out in what they call holdback funds. So already for 2021, districts have gotten one amount of that. And if there's an expectation by June 30th, you'll get a bit more. And we have forecasted that in the forecast statement. So it's often the case that there will be revenues after you set your amended budget. It's one of the reasons why I say the system has a conservatism built into it, because you have projected enrollments, then your enrollments might increase in the fall, and then they increase in February and May. All of those things tend to drive you to having a higher revenue figure at the end of June than what you have in your amended budget.
In terms of the new programs and costs from slide 25, why would you fund new strategic initiatives when the school district is facing serious negative budget pressures and in an ongoing emergency situation, i.e. when there are cuts to EAs, school food programs, and reading recovery?
Certainly, you always have to look at the need of those additional services and costs, and the board needs to weigh those against the reductions, because basically they're not the reductions to fund the ongoing costs. They are additional services that need to be, then you're making different choices. So they should be looked at and prioritized. And certainly one of the things the report says is do they get weighed off against something that's already happening rather than taking one of the reduction options to pay for them?
Are there certain cuts that can be readily scaled back or reversed in September if enrollment numbers go up? In my mind, should the cuts to music, reading recovery, and other programs happen, we can't readily unwind those cuts. But it seems to me that there are other cuts that can be scaled back should revenue increase.
And that's really part of the discussion that needs to happen as you determine which of these you take, which are items that are farthest away from classroom and schools. And you would usually, and that's why I talk about the principles, but you would usually start there and determine, which reduction options are the easiest to implement. And another way may be that's a very good question. Do you then look for things that could be easily reinstated if need be? Is another good principle perhaps that the board may want to think about as you're trying to prioritize these reductions.
One of my main issues with this budget debacle is the lack of understanding of the culture of the community and school district. Similarly, the thinly veiled racism, anti-Indigenous sentiment used to justify cuts. Does that not matter? How do we as community members trust the people in charge when they clearly don't understand the community and students they are serving? And will the board and upper management be able to have anti-racism training before next school year?
Well, certainly that's not the concern about whether I understand the community. I understand that people may have questions about that, for sure. I don't, I live in Machosen, actually.
The board did vote to fund anti-racism training. And I think we're all pretty deeply committed to that. And so that is going to happen. I'm not sure when specifically, but as soon as possible. And I do note that there have been some pretty heartfelt apologies and commitments, and we have reached out to the First Nations Education Steering Council for support in that work, and we're just going to keep our shoulder to the wheel and figuring out how to do this in a good way. And then I have some questions in the chat. Is the chair actually allowed to cancel or postpone a special board meeting? Which bylaw says that? I don't think it's spelled out in our bylaws. Secretary Treasurer, are you able to address that?
I believe it is in a bylaw, but I don't know it off the top of my heart. I can try to research that while you take another question if you like.
Sure.
Because I would imagine because the chair or trustees or superintendent or secretary treasurer can call a meeting, the reverse would be in effect, but I would have to research that.
Question for Joan Axford. Are you aware of any legal costs incurred by the school district in the years you reviewed?
I am not aware of the specifics. I just know that there was a projection of services which included legal costs that had been spent in the current year. On the operations side, I'm sure there was legal costs for capital. If you're saying that you've had some land transactions and some building transactions, there probably was some legal costs associated with those. So it was just the forecasted expenditures on the services line of the budget.
And the next question.
You will have a year-end audit by KPMG that'll look at your expenditures and make sure they've been categorized correctly.
Secretary Treasurer, when was the last time we had an audit?
I believe you would have had one the June 30th financials for 2020.
Yes, and then coming up again soon.
And then coming up, yes, there's probably been an audit plan already established.
No, the board has adopted that coming out of our audit committee.
Yes.
Ms. Axford, is Ms. Axford unaware of the extraordinary legal issues surrounding the proposed lease of Vic High land? Were these expenses not shared with Ms. Axford?
Yeah, no, I'm not aware of those transactions.
What specific changes is the school district considering in response to the feedback on the budget from Songhees, Esquimalt, and Métis Nation in Greater Victoria? What were the specific budget recommendations from the district's Indigenous Ad Hoc Committee referred to by the Métis Nation of Greater Victoria in their May 16th letter to the board? There's more, but perhaps we can deal with that so I don't put a whole bunch more. Superintendent? Secretary Treasurer.
We've reviewed letters from Songhees and Esquimalt, and I believe the INED committee, and we are reviewing those in terms of options for the board's debate, as well as trying to check off where we think we've met the needs of the letters, but they're definitely being reviewed.
Chair Waters mentioned that representatives from partner groups, including Songhees and Esquimalt nations, would be present at tonight's meeting, and I was hoping we would hear this information from them directly. They were certainly invited tonight and to make a presentation. Ms. Axford met with both chiefs today in a private meeting, so I'm not sure, probably not appropriate to share the contents of that meeting.
No, it provided them with an opportunity to ask the questions about the report and the options, and I believe they will be providing more advice to the board.
And then why were music teachers not directly consulted? If the answer is passed through 2 to 3 people, answers can be misconstrued or miscommunicated. Superintendent or Secretary Treasurer? This speaks to how we do consultations.
Yes, as previously answered, we used our employment structure, I guess, or our organizational structure to communicate with music teachers through our associate superintendent to the principals, vice principals, to the music teachers.
Has this budget process to date included a review of all budget areas in detail, including expenses? Specifically, did the district review all proposed expenses and asked whether those expenses should continue?
We asked departments to review their budgets twice. We did a 4-year historical analysis of departments this year to find out where there were chronic carry forwards that were no longer required in order to reduce our status quo budgets or our carry forwards. And so throughout the, I would say, March to April process, departments reviewed their budgets twice and were asked to make some reductions. Specifically and most impacted would be the district team through the learning team and some technology, as well as some departments that had chronic carry forwards.
On page 4, the summary of the budget, can you walk us through that calculation? Is it supposed to net to 0, Ms. Axford?
It is supposed to be a summary, and to show that it doesn't net to 0, there still are decisions to be made. If the sustainable budget shortfall is 7.3 million, you could add an equipment budget to that. You could add additions to that. You might not. If you do, you're probably going to have to take most of the options and most of the reserves. So you're going to have to determine it's a balancing number. It's just to show you that there are options on the table greater, perhaps, than what you need in combination with the reserves. So if you think about what I go on to say a little bit later, and that is, possibly considering how you can do this over a 2-year period and how you might anticipate enrollment growth in the amended budget such that you start to replace some of the reserves that you use. So if you think about your annual budget, you try and use as few of those reductions as you can tolerate, and use the reserves on that balancing piece, not add the 1.4 and the 1.355, and then replenish some of those things if the enrollment does come in, if revenues do go up, if government decides that they've got more money in the coffers to give public education, that could replace some of the reserves that you might use and allow that 2-year look that we've been talking about, as well as if you choose wisely the reduction options, you may be able to put some of those back in during a school year. So that's what that particular table is supposed to show, is that there is still some room to make some of those decisions and trade-offs. Thank you.
Ms. Axford, would you please clarify the most effective way for rights holders, stakeholders, and others to be consulted to explore options in the budget process? The process described by the Secretary Treasurer for consulting with music teachers was after the initial budget was put forth, and it was to principal, not directly with music teachers, before the budget was put forth.
Certainly, it's really hard to decide on the trade-offs that I answered the previous question on if you don't understand what's in the budget to begin with, right? It's difficult to make those choices. So some kind of a process whereby you talk with people about what makes up the status quo budget first. What types of expenditures are there, what's overhead, what's ongoing, what's one time, and then move forward to creating options for change. I think that will be something that the district will have to invest time and energy in to regain the trust that we heard from one or more of the speakers this evening. just so that everyone comes to agreement on what makes up the current expenditures and just how difficult it is to find reductions. And it is difficult because every single expense that you have on the books should be benefiting students. So therefore, reducing anything will cause some pain to someone.
My understanding is that the community was asking if there were other options other than using reserves, i.e. cuts to senior administration FTEs. Is it a possibility to discuss a freeze or cuts to senior admin salaries in lieu of terminating a senior administrative position?
Well, certainly if you have a contract of employment with someone and you reduce their compensation or reduce their work conditions under those contracts, that can be considered constructive dismissal. And of course, you can be needing to pay severance on those kinds of things. Certainly one of the things we talked about on Tuesday evening with Trustee Painter asking a question around just doing some more in-depth comparisons around the numbers of staff, staff per student, overhead per student, those kinds of things, just to see if, how you compare with other districts and perhaps areas where you may want to look more with more depth.
There's been an analysis done of the SD61 budget showing that the operating budget would actually not be in deficit if it were not for the large transfers to the capital fund. The Secretary Treasurer's presentation have not made it clear that this is the reason why the board is cutting programs of vital importance to students. I understand the capital budget does not need to be balanced. Why should vulnerable children shoulder the burden of expensive building projects? Is this how budgets are supposed to work?
I'm unclear about the question that the transfer to capital has caused the deficit. Because we talked about the fact that the expenses that are capitalized are either budgeted for, as you have this 1.4 that's been requested to be budgeted and therefore moves from operating to capital to be capitalized, or someone has chosen to spend operating funds on something that needs to be capitalized and you move it there. It was already intended to be spent in the current budget. So I did not find transfers that were going over to capital from operating that were budgeted for something else in operating. So I don't believe, in fact, the schedule that's shown there that shows how the accumulated reserve has changed over time was really to do with pulling money over that was capital money spent with operating funds and capitalizing it, moving those costs over. And that's what I saw going over to the capital fund.
Okay, I have a couple more questions around, sorry, I'm getting lost in here. Was the board of directors, the entirety, I assume that means trustees, consulted on the hiring of Ms. Axford for the independent review of operating costs? Superintendent?
Sorry, Trustee Chair, I was paying attention to something else that's happening at the same time. Can you repeat the question?
Was the entirety of the board consulted on hiring Ms. Axford?
So Ms. Axford, as I mentioned in the meeting when we first started this process, we had heard a lot from our community and their concerns about the budget process and the concerns about all the different aspects, understanding them, how we got here, lots of questions and concerns about that. They had also reached out to the Ministry of Education, and I let the board know that the Ministry of Education was also sharing that our public and community was having lots of concerns. And so meeting with the chair and vice chair in regards to the opportunity for someone to come in with an independent view who had great skill and history in education to be able to provide our community, our public, our staff with that extra set of eyes to be able to be somebody who wasn't connected to our school district, but certainly connected to the system with high respect, to answer some of the questions that the public was being put forward. And so I put that forward to the chair and vice chair. That's also the board. And we made a motion that the board could vote down if they didn't want to follow that process through. So that was the process and steps that we went through. And the board, of course, approved the motion, bringing Ms. Axford in with her expertise and another set of eyes. And I have heard, as you've heard several times tonight, the public has appreciated the clarification from another source on where we are and where we're going. It's not perfect. It's not everything we want. And certainly the recommendations for what to look like in our future is a good one. It's still going to be a difficult process, but that's the process that we went through.
Why were the terms of reference, Superintendent, this is for you again. Why were the terms of reference not given to the board to review before the board meeting? And were any trustees given visibility of the terms of reference before the board meeting?
So Ms. Axford connected with us between Sunday, Monday, and in that process reviewed very quickly all the pieces that we had heard and the ministry had heard from the community. And we created the terms of reference to put forward to the Board of Trustees.
Trustee McNally is asking why I'm not supposed to be answering questions. I'm supposed to be listening. So that is the role I'm taking. I think we have one more on this topic. Were the trustees, or why were the trustees not consulted regarding the person chosen for the position of independent advisor?
Again, I put forward a proposal and hiring in Ms. Axford. She has a high degree of respect in our province. It was a suggestion and recommendation. They certainly did not have to abide by that. They could have voted it down.
And then I think Secretary Treasurer, I just want to loop back to you if you had a question around bylaw 9360. I think this was Ms. Emma Hori's question. You are muted. Put $1 in the jar.
Another $1 in the jar. Sorry about that. So bylaw 9360, item 14, article 14 says the board chair may reschedule any regularly scheduled general meeting of the board to a different time and date in order to meet the business requirements of the board. And given that the independent advisor was coming in, it was seen to meet the business requirements of the board to not have the board meeting on May 17th, but to await the results of the independent advisor.
This is Mari. Thank you for the question. I just have another question. I guess the bylaw said that it was a regularly scheduled board meeting. So that's why I was just wondering, it was a special budget meeting. So I guess I just thought maybe there was a distinction between those two, but it's okay. So everything is a regularly scheduled meeting.
Certainly if trustees trustees can bring forward any concerns and we can have that discussion. Trustees can also call special meetings as we're doing for tomorrow night. So that concludes all of the questions that I have. Trustee McNally, it just seems like the board is overly reliant on staff if the chair doesn't answer questions. I'm facilitating the meeting tonight. I'm not here to answer questions. I'm one equal among 9. I don't have any special powers to answer questions. This is an opportunity to ask Ms. Axford questions, and certainly to ask our staff where they can. If you would like trustees to answer questions, the best way to do that is to submit your questions or to reach out to us. I'm always happy and available to meet with folks online, in person. So certainly you can reach out to all of us. We're very accessible. Yeah, so I want to thank everybody. And I just got one last question. Who is us? I don't know what that is referring to. If that person wants to resubmit, I'm happy to forward it on to somebody who can respond. Our next scheduled meeting is tomorrow night. And we have one scheduled for Monday and one scheduled for Tuesday. And then we also have our ed policy and operations committees coming up, as well as the board meeting at the end of the month. So there are lots of opportunities to come and have engagement with us. We're just so blessed to have a community that has such a high level of engagement. We recognize this is just a very, very challenging process, especially as we are, certainly as a board, we're new to this. And I think Victoria, we haven't done this in well over a decade. And it is very, very challenging. So we're so grateful to all of you for coming and bringing your questions, and especially grateful to Ms. Axford for all the time you've put into supporting us. And I know you're going to continue to support us through to the end of this budget process. So I look forward to future conversations. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you